everybody, and welcome to the FAIR Festival 2021. I am so excited to be here with you today. My name is Emily Johnston, and I will be your moderator guiding you through the festival over the next 3 days. And here we are, a wonderful gathering of Go FAIR community members from around the world. We have researchers, scientists, data experts, developers, and science policy makers all coming together to make this shift towards FAIR visible. After 3 years of the Go FAIR community existing and working hard on FAIR research data management, it's time now to consolidate our achievements and pave the way for future activities. This festival has been organised by the Go FAIR initiative, which aims to implement the FAIR data principles. You've probably heard them before, but I want to share them again because they're so important. It's all about making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And it offers an open and inclusive ecosystem for individuals, for institutions, and organizations working together through implementation networks, which you might be part of if you're joining us today. The Go FAIR initiative has supported numerous pioneers in FAIR research data management over the past few years. And meanwhile, the European Open Science Cloud and other national research data infrastructures have come into place. And now the big question is, where will the path lead from here? Together with the whole community, we would like to create a festival on recent work and also to explore the future top priorities. So what's going to happen over the next 3 days? Well, we have a simple but pretty exciting lineup for you. So every day, we want to invite you to listen, to enjoy, to eat, to drink, to get into the festival spirit. Every day at lunchtime in the European time zone, we will have a plenary discussion. Today's plenary discussion is our opening of the festival, and it's all about FAIR Minds Open Science. Tomorrow, we will have an exploration of the cloud cosmos. So we will talk about NFDI, Gaia X, and EOSC. And on Wednesday, we have the Global Open FAIR Changes Happen. In the afternoon, it's all about getting hands-on and diving into collaborative workshops. We have 2 rounds of workshops at 3:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m., which are organized by the Go FAIR implementation networks and the other FAIR supporters. So of course, you can check out the program to find which topics are most interesting to you, because we will also have some parallel sessions. And of course, being at a festival is not only about taking in wonderful information, but also meeting the other participants. And that is what we're going to give you the chance to do on Tuesday and on Wednesday, where we have 2 networking sessions where you can meet attendees and the speakers. They will both happen right after the plenary. And so tomorrow, Tuesday at 1:30 p.m., we'll have a hop-on, hop-off lunch for making new connections. And on Wednesday at 1:30 p.m., European time zone, of course, we have not science, but FAIR fiction time, making science a better place. And now this brings us to this coming session. And what is this all about? So our first panel session is really intended to offer you both a retrospective and an outlook. The speakers and panelists will share their perspective on the Go FAIR initiative and what the FAIR principles mean for the future development of open science infrastructures. We are going to start in a moment with a welcome from Hans-Josef Linkens, followed by an ignition talk by Jean-Claude Bergermann. And then we have some of our members for a panel discussion, which will be led by Klaus Tochtermann. And we're very happy to welcome Susanne Duchomev, member of the Go FAIR Executive Board, Elena Gilia, coordinator of the Go FAIR Implementation Network Co-Operos, Hans-Josef Linkens, Federal Ministry of Education and Research Germany, Caro Lubin, president of the EOSC Association, and Barend Mons, director of the Go FAIR International Support and Coordination Office. And this will be followed by a Q&A with the audience. And there'll be other chances for you to participate as well, but I'll tell you about that a little bit later on. Before we get into all of that exciting panel discussion time though, it's my huge pleasure to welcome Hans-Josef Linkens from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research Germany, who have been a funder of the Go FAIR initiative to welcome you today to the festival. Welcome, Hans-Josef. How are you today? Hans, I believe we can't hear you at the moment. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
I thought it was just me, but I think that we didn't hear you. So could you please begin your introduction?
Yeah, sure. I just said hello to everybody. Thank you, Emily. Dear Klaus Tochtermann, dear fellow panelists, fair colleagues around the world. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this virtual meeting. And it is a particular pleasure for me to be at this conference because it celebrates the successful end of the Go Fair project. And as Emily said already, it gives also a chance to look at the future. But let me start by looking back to the beginning of the Go Fair project. From its very beginning, Go Fair was closely linked to the development of the European Open Science Cloud, EOSC. And this EOSC was first announced in the respective Commission communication of 2016. In order to create some momentum and thus to kickstart the European Open Science Cloud, in 2017, the Dutch and the German ministries decided on a political level to support a joint initiatives, which they also presented to the Competitiveness Council. The idea was to create national nodes for the EOSC and pilot projects on which the broader European initiative could develop. It was intended as an open initiative. So Go Fair soon was expanded to France and subsequently to a number of other countries. The overarching idea of Go Fair was to have a bottom-up, a complete, open to all, a cross-border and a cross-disciplinary approach, which ensures a broad involvement of European science community. And so I think it is fair to say that Go Fair, with its implementation focus, has proven to deliver to these expectations and to prepare the ground for the European Open Science Cloud. Since the start, since 2017, in both Germany and in Europe, there has been enormous progress. Based on the FAIR principles, the EOSC has developed from the idea to various projects and to now a more stable structure of a tripartite partnership. And we will hear about this, of course, much more and from Karel and others in this meeting. The EOSC Association, which has been established 1 year ago, has now the development of the EOSC in its hands. And that's good because now the development of the European Open Science Cloud is very much in the hand of science. And this European Open Science Cloud has the key role to establish a web of fair data and services. The European Union will continue to support the European Open Science Cloud through its Horizon Europe program, and the member states contribute to the EOSC with their institutions and national policies. In Germany, our central, but not the only, contribution is our National Research Data Infrastructure. NFDI is the abbreviation, which is based on consortia in different research areas. In its final stage, the NFDI will include up to 30 consortia across all disciplines and across all regions in Germany. The NFDI, eingetragener Verein, as the legal entity, is the body which coordinates the activities of the National Research Data Infrastructure. And it's a little bit comparable to the European Open Science Cloud. The NFDI is centered around the FAIR data and the FAIR principles. and on a national level, it has very much benefited from the activities and the implementation networks which have been established through the GoFair projects. Coming to the end, let me widen a little bit the view and say thanks to the initiatives, because thanks to GoFair, but also the European Open Science Cloud and the NFDI, but also through our more recent experiences in the pandemic, the importance of high quality data has become obvious. In order to obtain better and faster research, to deal with the great challenges of our society and to move to the frontier of human knowledge, we must continue the work on data sharing. The relevance of high quality, fair data is widely recognized, and this is acknowledged on the political level in Germany, for instance, through a data strategy which has been set up by the federal government, or an action plan on research data. Both of them have been established in the last few months. And this is only speaking of Germany, some German experience we do have. So coming to the end, this is the look back. But what lies ahead of us? So is all said and done? No, I don't think so. I would see the following urgent tasks for the next time to come. And I would like to describe them in 3 short points. The first is we do have to continue implementing the structures of NFDI, EUSC, and others as a web of fair data. We have to make the FAIR principles strong through implementing these structures. The second point is we have to reach out. And I mean reach out in a regional way. So I'm very happy that there will be a talk about global open data and global fair data. But I mean also to industry. As we also will talk about, I'm very happy that there is a cooperation between the NFDI and Gaia-X, and based on the fair data principles. This is very important, and I think this should continue, and we have to extend it to a European level. And my last point is I see the task that we need to reach out also to potential users of fair data by working on data literacy and data competence. I would say also we have to work on a cultural change. That I'm convinced that scientists, that the fair minds are keys to make better use of fair data and for increasing knowledge. Therefore, I'm very happy that a lot of fair minds, open minds to the FAIR principles, are here together in this festival, and I'm very glad to celebrate it with you. I wish you all a very good conference. Thank you very much.
Hans-Josef Lincoln, thank you so much for this wonderful welcome and beginning into our festival with this. Yeah, it was great to have a look back of where the whole movement has come from and where it's headed next. So it's great to have you here, and we look forward to hearing more from you later on. Now we're going to invite Jean-Claude Bergman to share an ignition talk with us. Now, he is the former head of Unit Open Science, DG for Research and Innovation from the European Commission. Unfortunately, he's actually on a flight right now, but he has prepared a speech for us, which we'll play for you now. So it's wonderful to have him here in spirit, and I'm sure he is thinking of us now while he's in the sky. And without further ado, let's hear from Jean-Claude Bergman.
Good morning, good afternoon to all of you in this FAIR festival. I'm very pleased that I was offered the opportunity to contribute to the opening panel with these distinguished colleagues and speakers, because I cannot make it myself, because at the time speaking, I'm probably in a plane if, of course, the COVID regulations do not change by then. Now, having a bumpy flight was also a little bit the genesis of EOSC, and I was asked by the organizers of this festival to reflect on the importance the FAIR community and the Go FAIR movement had, and the FAIR principles themselves had, on the creation of EOSC past, present, future. As I said, it was a bumpy road, and one of the compasses that we had in order to keep EOSC on track and to make it moving was certainly FAIR. And let me explain that in 3 points. First of all, in order to make sure that we had enough support within the community and within the decision-making part of EOSC, FAIRs played an essential role. First of on two levels. First of all, the ideas that we started formulating around EOSC in 2016-17 that got crystallized in the staff working documents and so forth, about how EOSC should look like and what it should do, are to a very large extent the result of what the expert group chaired by Professor Barend Mons formulated, and most of the people that were participating in those expert groups, and in particular that one which was key for the first blueprints for EOSC, well, most of these ideas were pronounced by people belonging to the FAIR community, or at least adhering at it, and as a result of that, as an essential part of EOSC, we had, of course, the whole principle of FAIR. And that explains why later on, in the structure of what we want to achieve with EOSC, we did not focus on physical hosting, we did not focus on making it a portal, because that was what in those days was quite popular in other parts of the decision-making process in Europe, but we chose radically for a technology-independent, platform-independent approach, which is the only logical one, namely FAIR. So in that respect, the intellectual input of FAIR on what EOSC has in the end become, not as a structure, but as a philosophy, as a policy approach to scientific research and scientific data, is gigantic. Secondly, within that first point of the importance of FAIR, we have, of course, the fact that two of the leading nations in the Go FAIR community, namely Germany and the Netherlands, at a critical point in the decision-making in Brussels, namely the autumn of 2017, came up via their ministers, namely Georg Schutte and Sander Dekker, with a so-called non-paper which they distributed at the critical meeting of the Program Committee on Infrastructure Policies, where we had to have the go-ahead for going on with the work, the staff working document and so on. Now that non-paper, which was explicitly stating that the importance of open science for Europe and hence the importance of a FAIR approach to making it happen, and by coincidence an EOSC to make it possible, well, that non-paper, as I describe in my article for the MIT Journal on Data, has been a tipping point in having enough support to go ahead with all the work, which then in the end became EOSC in 2018, 2019, and so forth. So intellectually speaking and politically speaking, I think it is fair to say that the FAIR way of looking at the future of research data and the FAIR authority of the people behind it played a cardinal role, an essential role in the genesis of EOSC. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Secondly, it is even more important to see that FAIR is globally becoming the global standard for talking about the future of research data and research underpinning science. Why? What we see happening is all over the world we have EOSC's type of initiatives taking place. We have the German initiative, the NFDI, we have the Chinese initiative, the Chinese Science and Technology Cloud, we have the Australian Research Data Commons, we have the Malaysian Open Science Platform, the Open Science, the African Open Science Platform, and so forth. So we see actually emerging around the world a series of initiatives that to some degree can be compared to EOSC. They all have different priorities, but they all of them support the deployment and the installment of a fair approach to open science. And that is of course essential, because it is an illusion to think that we can get to a global open science cloud, which is a copy of the European Open Science Cloud or the United States Open Science Cloud. By the way, there are strong rumors now that in the US there is also something going on to do something similar like we did in Europe. But the fact that this gets an articulation which is politically different or policy-wise different across the globe is quite normal. It is essential, on the other hand, that the building block to make it happen is fair, because without fair we would not have a global open science approach anyhow, and it would be impossible that these regional initiatives do what science asks us to do, namely make it a global, interoperable, accessible, findable and reusable internet of fair data and services. So the importance of FAIR is much more than being an essential building block for EOSC. It is an essential building block for a global open science approach anyhow, and it's actually much more pertinent to say that without that it will never ever happen. And then I think that was the second point I wanted to make, and the third point I wanted to make is that in the mid to long term, and I make a little bit of a detour to come to my point, I think that we as a scientific community engaged in open science, open data and so forth, we will have to work much more on what I personally call the global open data commons. And I think that that is inevitable if we see the importance of data, not only for science, but for data for our societies at large. And secondly, how private and public players try to maximize the benefit of having premium access privately or restricted access politically to these data. Or to put it differently, if the future of science is data science, and because of artificial intelligence, the only way to guarantee that this data science is done in a way that it is not hijacked privately nor publicly is by making sure that the architecture of that data science is as open as possible, as closed as needed, but in particular that architecture responds to the FAIR principles, because without having a global research data architecture that is findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable, we will never ever be able to avoid that the future of research data is being hijacked in one way or another. So to wind up, dear colleagues, and once again, sorry I cannot be with you for the discussion, FAIR has been essential for EOSC. FAIR is the glue between all these regional, I'm talking on a global scale now, initiatives that we see around the world, which are open science cloud type of initiatives. And thirdly, on the mid to long term, FAIR is I would say a precondition to make sure that we work together on a global data commons, which is the industrial oil, the oil of the so-called knowledge society. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak like this remotely. I hope it is the last time, and that in the future we can indeed meet in vivo, because fair or not, we do miss the personal contacts with all these nice people on the ball here. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Fantastic, and what a wonderful transition now into our first panel discussion of the FAIR Festival. And I'm here together with Klaus Tochtermann. Klaus, welcome.
Hi, Emily. Hi.
Klaus Tochtermann, you have been Professor for Digital Information Infrastructures in the Computer Science Department of Kiel University since 2010 and the Director of the ZBW Leibniz Information Center for Economics. You're also involved in numerous committees on the topic of research data management, such as the German Council for Scientific Information Infrastructures, the EOSC Association, and the GoFair Initiative. And today you will also moderate our first panel discussion. How are you doing this morning, Klaus? What's your impression so far?
Doing okay, thank you very much. If I look outside, today it just rains once, which kicked off at 7 o'clock, and it will probably not stop until the end of the conference. But the weekend was just great. It was sunny and warm. And I think if I look around, all the teams, the national football teams won their matches. So we have a successful group here of not only experts in data management, but also experts in how to play soccer at the European Championship.
So we can only succeed together. That's fantastic. Yes, it's definitely nice to have a bit of rain after a very, very hot weekend, and that makes it a perfect day to be here and part of this festival, right? So before I hand over to you, I want to share with everybody listening a couple of housekeeping rules and also ways you can engage as the audience in the panel discussion. Because as you know, this is a festival and this is about all of us contributing together. We have a couple of ways you can contribute. Firstly, you can use the Q&A for questions and to contribute to the discussion. We have a Q&A session happening after the panel. So you will see that on the right side of your screen, and you can vote up your favorite questions as well. Next to that, you'll also see there's a chat function, so you can also discuss directly with your peers here at the festival. Keep in mind that the session will be recorded and will be available after the festival, and we want to invite you to stay fair, stay present, and tweet #FairFestival2021. Now, aside from these two things, we also have one other invitation to you to be part of the discussion, and that is that we have a Mentimeter poll. We'll share the link with you now, and some of the questions in there are also the same questions we're going to ask the panel as well as we go along. So we also want to give you a chance to share your voice on those questions, and then partway through, we will share the results and have a look what you have to say as well. And of course, this is a community event, so we really want to know what you think. And without further ado, then I want to hand over to you, Klaus, and wish you a wonderful panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Emily. The discussion will be split up into two parts. I will first start with the panelists and discuss with them the past, the present, and the future of Go Fair, or the development of the FAIR principles. And after that, we will also open the discussion to the audience, so you can put your questions in the chat. And then I will forward these questions here to the panelists to make it a little bit more interactive. And to kick off, I have a warm-up question to all of the panelists, which now appear, I think, on the screen. Here they are. They have already been introduced by Emily at the beginning. It's Hans-Josef, it's Elena, it's Baron, it's Suzanne, it's Karel. So welcome here to this panel. And my opening question, the warm-up question, so to say, would be related to the title. The title of this opening session is FAIR Minds, Open Science, and you can read it in two different ways. So how do you understand the title? What is your take on this? And I would like to start with Elena, please.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. The title of this FAIR festival reminds me of Neelie Kroes quote, which is open science depends on open minds. And I would say that FAIR enables open science, as I always see the first three components, FAI, concur to R, reusable, to booster the creation of new knowledge or new innovation, for the benefit of any one of us. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Barend, what's your take on this? How do you read the title?
Of course, Elena said everything I wanted to say, but let me first say that in addition to a winning team, we also are now beating Mercedes in the F1. That was almost impossible before, but now we have a Dutch driver beating Mercedes. That's also good for the Germans. No, seriously, on open, I say now frequently that I almost start to hate the term open. Because first of all, scientists hear free, as in gratuit. And of course, not all data can be open. So open science is not the same as everything should be open. As Jean-Claude also said, it should all be built on open standards and as transparent as possible. And for me, open science, the term fair science would even be better, because it is all about reproducibility, transparency, equality, and especially that you have a very rich metadata to allow others to see exactly what you did and to determine, as Elena said, whether data, no matter how FANI they are, if they are reusable, also in terms of being fit for purpose. So not all data, even if they are high quality, are good for your purpose. And that's why metadata are extremely important, and fair is not the same as open, and even more important than open.
Okay, thank you, Barend. We just continue with Hans-Josef.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it's an excellent title because you can read it in different ways. Actually, I prefer to read it as Fair Minds, Open Science. So I would focus in the moment on people, on scientists who can make use of this data because they are key to have the real cultural change which is needed on a structural level. Finally, fair also sounds very nice, because who does not want to be called fair? So this is a nice wording anyway. So that's nice too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. What's your take on this, on the title of this panel?
Thank you, Klaus. Good morning, everyone. So I'd like to, I think actually I'm pretty, I completely agree what Hans-Josef just said with this idea of fair mind. And maybe I can say that, I can add that we can also understand the fair as the adjective and not always as the acronym. And I think that it's also a way to be open. And if we want to have a fair and open community, that means also involving as largely as possible all the people in our community, and not having always the same usual suspects that are already part of the open science movement. And actually, I think this is part of the spirit of this FAIR festival, and just the title festival is a good way to show how open I think it is to the whole community.
Okay, and now Carl, it's on you.
Yeah, last. It's all been said, but thank you, Klaus, first of all, for inviting me, and welcome everybody to this festival as was just described. I was a little bit puzzled by the title because it has no punctuation. It is open science with not capitals, and I always write it with capitals to identify the movement of open science. So rightfully, the result is that you can read it in different forms, and if you ignore capitals and if you ignore punctuation, and you can read it as open science needs the FAIR principles, or FAIR takes open science as guiding, or FAIR minds, as was said before, lead to open science minds. But in my view, both the open science movement and the FAIR movement are essential. I would not agree with Barend by saying FAIR science, because the open science movement for me is more than the FAIR science movement. It's also about rewards and recognition, about citizen science, about training, about legal interoperability, etc., etc. These are not aspects of the FAIR as an acronym science set. So FAIR science is part of the open science movement. And so without FAIR, no open science, but without open science, no FAIR. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. I would like to continue with you looking back like 3 years ago, and I would like to look back to Go Fair and EOSC, and I will now talk with Carol and Barend a little bit how the situation, how the landscape changed over the past 3 years. And Carol, the Go Fair initiative was founded as a Kickstarter of the EOSC as a early pilot activity to do the first implementations of the EOSC. Could you briefly explain where we stood 3 years ago with the EOSC and where do we stand now?
I'll try, and I'll try and put in my explanation a little bit of my own development. Without knowing it, in 2014, I was indirectly involved in the Lawrence workshop which I think was organized by Barend, and I think he was doing it under the heading of DTL at that time, and I was the chair of DTL, the Dutch Tech Center of Life Sciences. To be honest, I didn't realize it at all at that moment in time. I was not part of the workshop, and I only realized later how important that workshop has been in formulating the FAIR principles, which came out in the description as they came in 2016. And in 2017, when Go FAIR was kicked off, and indeed, in the discussions I had with Barend in that period, we, and especially Barend, saw this as a way of kickstarting EOSC. Not the only way, there's many other initiatives, but these initiatives, in our view, were to, let's say, converge. We have seen a, let's say, 5 years, 6 years divergence or a realization phase in the domain of EOSC, with a lot of projects, with a lot of initiatives, not necessarily coordinated, with no central and definitely no top-down guidance. And I don't think there should be a top-down guidance. But the difference is that as of, let's say, the new governance structure, which was stimulated by the European Commission through its interim governance structure with the executive and the governance board, now leading to the EOSC association, to the partnership, to the discussion together with the three parties, as Hans-Josef referred to, the member states, the association, and the Commission. We are entering a convergence phase, and this is the difference that has led to that has resulted in where we are today from 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, we were in the middle of a creolization divergence phase, and I really have a feeling we are entering a convergence phase at this moment. Go FAIR is one of the most important initiatives in this convergence.
Okay, and this already leads to the next question. What's your personal opinion on the impact Go FAIR had and will have on the vision of increasing the fair data management, the utility of data and other digital resources?
To be honest, I don't think the Go FAIR and Go FAIR people have a real idea on what their impact is. It's much wider than you can measure. You know the expression, not everything you can measure is useful, but the other way around is more important. Not all the good things and the useful things are measurable. And this is an example of them. I think this movement indirectly has stimulated so many people and so many other activities by the individuals and by the INS and by the activities that came from it with many people. I won't start calling names because there are too many, but as a result of that, the vision, which was for me started with the high-level expert group report on EOSC, has, let's say, sort of materialized in a small form in Go FAIR, is materializing further in the EOSC association and the things the association is doing, and is much wider than we all realize. Future, and then if we look back in the history, we'll tell how this went.
Okay, thank you very much. And now the other perspective, Barend, from the Go FAIR perspective. It's 3 years ago, or since 3 years, you have been very enthusiastic, very active in moving forward the FAIR principles, and you have certainly coined very much worldwide the FAIR movement. What's your opinion? Could you briefly explain where did we stand 3 years ago and where do we stand now with Go FAIR, with the FAIR principles?
Yeah. First of all, I think looking back, I was very surprised that 2 secretaries of states would suddenly support something and that a non-paper was so influential. I never heard the term non-paper before. Computers like that, they don't like papers, so non-papers are better. Anyway, I think our first ambition was indeed, when we heard this is, let's get going with obvious things while we have some time needed to realize the EOSC at the European level. I remember we sort of proposed to our ministries that we would have 7 implementation networks by the end of the project. And apparently we answered a big need, which was resulting very soon in rather 30 implementation networks. Not all of them ever so active, but very nicely, now that we are discussing Go FAIR follow-up, we'll get to that later in a separate session, what I liked very much that from one of the prospective offices, actually René Belzer from Denmark, I go to CoFair to get things done. I like that very much. We have focused entirely on let's just try it, let's do it, stop talking, try it out. And what we have reached, rather than just a network, is some very tangible results. Like FAIR digital objects are very much related to what we did. The FAIR implementation profiles, metadata for machine workshops, FAIR data points. So what the community has really brought is some very practical building blocks that can now be reused in the EOSC, but clearly also globally. And I see the next phase for later, that we go really global and that GoFair has an influence way beyond the EOSC, which is something to be proud of, I think, for all of us.
This also refers to what Jean-Claude mentioned, as he said, FAIR is the building block of the global open science approach. So the FAIR principles will be the glue between all the different cloud movements we have.
Maybe one thing I wanted to say as well is that now that the original FAIR paper got 4,600 citations, it became a hype term. The funders start to require FAIR. So it also was, by lots of people, it's watered down to a meaningless term. Like, oh, you have a PDF with the DOI, now you're FAIR. So I think GoFair as a community also has a responsibility to safeguard the actual meaning of FAIR.
Okay, let's have a look at what's going on at the moment. And here I would like to briefly discuss with Karen, Elena, and Suzanne on the FAIR developments in the implementation networks, in the executive board. Before I enter into the discussion with Elena and Suzanne, I would like to ask Carol and Elena a question which is also in the Mentimeter, so also our attendees are invited to answer the following question on Mentimeter. On a scale of 1 to 10, how fair have we been in 2017 when GoFair started, and how fair are we today on a scale between 1 and 10? So all the attendants are invited to enter their scale or their assessment in Mentimeter, and I would like to ask Elena and Carol about their assessment, and then we can compare it later on. So Elena, what's your...
Yeah, I won't give you a number. I would say it depends, because it depends on disciplines and it depends on countries. You know, if you think about social sciences and humanities, they might be a bit behind, but not having tools, they have to build their tools. So it's an advantage in a sense, because they can avoid the mistake maybe the STM did. But anyway, and you also have some, I would say, divide between countries. Because if you look at southern countries in Europe, like in my country, Italy, we again are a bit behind with respect to other countries which maybe have been working on FAIR for the last, I would say, 5 years or more. So we are facing a disciplinary and country divide. Sometimes in Italy, they never know what FAIR is. They think it could be a sort of new disease, maybe. And when I give my training, I always run a FAIR awareness test at the beginning, at the end. And the results are very different. So maybe they assume they know what FAIR is, like Barend was saying, but in the end, the results change. Anyway, I would say that one of the measures of the GoFair or the EOSC success is precisely to what extent they contribute to fill this gap among disciplines and countries.
And if we had to put what you have just said into one figure, would it be a 4 or a 3? A 6 or a 7?
I don't know. I would say 5, just 5. In the middle. Okay. Yeah.
Carol. Carol, what do you think?
sorry. I'm going to give you numbers, more than one, and I hope that you're not disappointed.
I just need two.
Yeah, but you get that as well. I start in the future. I'm sure that most of you have heard me saying that if in 2040, 50% of the relevant data of research would be as fair as is possible at that moment in time, depending on the developments of the FAIR principles, I would be happy. That means in 2040, it gets a 5. That means if I make an asymptotic curve to 2060, 2070, then at 2030, it gets a 3. In 2021, it gets a 1. And in 2017, it was between 0 and 1. So 2017, between 0 and 1, a 1 today, and hopefully a 3 in 2030.
Okay, thank you very much. Clear statement. Elena and Susanne, and I would like to start with Susanne. FAIR is one of the fundamental principles to open science, and you are one of the main advocates for open science in France, and you are engaged in the executive board of the Go FAIR initiative. And in Germany, we have, it's not really a saying, but we have the following phrase, which says, science is pop and open science is punk. And it means open science is still revolutionary. It's something different, something people are not used to. To what extent do you think is FAIR research data management still considered to be punk in the scientific world?
And do you like
Thank you very much. Thank you, Klaus, for the question. I think actually it's another way to ask the previous question you asked to Elena and Carol about the number and where we are exactly. So, but maybe I'm a bit more optimistic. I would say that let's say that FAIR research data management today is not punk anymore, as it must be, even if it's not adopted by a wider community, at least it is known, or even if it's not by all the scientific community, at least it is known at political, strategical, and I would say at the infrastructure level. So, which is already quite good in terms of influence and of knowledge. So I'm not sure we can say it's still punk. However, of course, we have to say to people that must be becoming more familiar with the idea, and not only with the idea, but more with the practice. And here I would like to highlight the need of the lack of skilled people, not only researcher, but in research data management, where I think there is a lot of effort that has to be done in training. And maybe the punk side is still here, how to have skilled people in research data management. That could be, my answer in two perspectives.
Susanne, to continue on this, convergence is an important topic. You also attended the EOSC symposium last week, and there was also convergence, one of the key issues which have been discussed among the community members. And Go FAIR, as you know, has built on 3 fields of action: Go Build, Go Train, and Go Change. And we have seen many overlaps between these 3 pillars. And therefore, last year we dedicated most of our activities on convergence. For example, the big convergence symposium in November, which we organized together with CoData. Where do you see the strongest developments, and for which areas is more commitment or engagement needed? And then the same question also to Elena once we got the answer from Susanne.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. So regarding the strongest development, maybe I can mention the work on the FAIR digital object, the FDO. I think it was something really interesting, especially because it opened a turn to me to move from the data perspective to the digital object perspective. And I think this is an important one in order to enlarge a bit the focus. As we know that data can be, it's a term that can be a bit confusing for the different community. And regarding the commitment needed, and here I'm pretty sure that Elena will share that and she will insist as well on that. It's, I would say, training. This is where we have some work, still some work to be done. And I can finish with maybe mentioning the need to bring more support now on the implementation side. I think thanks to FAIR, we had the good practices example from the different community, from the different implementation network. We have also the recommendation, the FAIR recommendation. So now what the next step would be how to help the community to concretely implement the work based on the example and on the recommendation. So I think that dedicated support is required here.
Okay. And Elena, what do you think is most important areas for future engagement and commitment?
Yeah, again, training, but not only, because I think I agree with Suzanne. All the efforts in framing this FAIR digital object was really what I consider an achievement in the past, let's say, 2 years. But I would say, yes, we need training, and by training, I mean two different things. I mean basic training. You can call it awareness raising among researchers, but we also need structured, I mean curricular training for data stewards. Because if you don't have a strong network of data stewards, researchers don't feel supported in verifying their data. And again, about the needs and coming back to the idea of open science being punk or pop, I would say again, it depends, because I strongly believe that what John Tennant was saying, that open science is just science done right. Okay, so basically it was researchers should do, okay, on a daily basis, and we will get there if we stop worshipping only the final output, okay, only the article, and if we start focusing on the whole process. Okay, and maybe also linking this idea of excellence is not being published in a high impact factor journal, but it should be linked to the reusability of your outputs. So I would say that once the research assessment criteria had taken on board this approach, open science will become pop and no longer punk.
Perfect.
Okay, so we look into the future, Barend. Jean-Claude mentioned that FAIR is an important factor related to dynamic data policies, artificial intelligence. You have been supporting the GoFair community over the past 3 years. What do you think are the next steps ahead in terms of implementing FAIR as a whole?
Thank you. First, I would respectfully disagree with Karel as usual. We agree on most things, but never on numbers of data stewards and so on. I think that if, at least in my field, we double the amount of data every 6 months, 90% of all data we have today were generated in the last 2 years. So if we start behaving well from now on, it's not a linear thing. It will be an exponential thing. In a few years' time, if the funders really require fair data from the output of what they fund, we will have 90% of the data fair. There are some legacy data that we still need to address. And I always say only make data fair the first time you want to feed them to a computer. And that is also my look into the future. The most frustrating thing in the last 3 years has been that people confiscate the term fair and forget the machine actionability. So the Americans came up with an alternative to the acronym FAIR, and it is fully AI ready. I love that, because if we want AI to be there in the future, it's not there yet, but it soon will come, then we need to have the data machine actionable. And that's what GoFair 2.0, which we'll discuss later, will focus on, in my view, to create the internet and the web of fair data and services. And we have made a layperson version of FDO. To explain it more, fair digital object doesn't mean anything to lay people. We call them machine actionable units of information, MAUIs. That means that's essentially what an FDO is, a fair digital object. So that is what we have to realize now in the GoFair community, could be leading there, to reach the final goal. Vision of George Strong, who was at the first FAIR meeting, he started NSFNet, as we all know, is the internet rules many computers and many datasets that are not interoperable to one computer, essentially, all computers connected, and a lot of datasets. And what we want to achieve in a decade from now is one machine and one dataset for
Okay, now from the perspective of the GoFair community, like from an implementation network like Cooperas, for which Elena is here, and Suzanne for the representative of the executive board of the GoFair initiative, what in your opinion is needed for or to further spur the FAIR movement? What is still lacking? Elena, maybe first, and then Suzanne.
Yeah, I would say again, training, and again, data stewards, because, you know, data stewards are crucial, not only to ensure a proper verification, but also to show researchers that it is possible doing it. It's not just theory or an administrative burden, you know. And I would say it's not possible, it's also beneficial, as their research workflow really on a daily basis will be smoother, sounder, and more useful for anyone else. But of course, I would also underline that they need to be rewarded by that, because it might be time consuming, you know.
Now a question which is also important for our attendees, because they can help building up a tech cloud. Maybe 1 or 3 or 2 or 3 terms on what is needed to make FAIR research data management the new normal. You want to build up a tech cloud? Do you have like 3 techs? What's needed, Elena?
Maybe infrastructures. Policies okay. And reward.
Infrastructure, policy, rewards. We will see what our attendees, what terms our attendees entered, rewards. And Suzanne, to you, I have the question which is also in the Mentimeter. What are the next steps ahead in terms of implementing FAIR as a whole? Again, just 2 or 3 terms describing what's necessary, so that in the end we will have FAIR being implemented. And this, again, to the audience is also a question in the Mentimeter. We want to build up another tech cloud.
Thank you, Klaus. So I would say first collaboration. Collaboration and information as a first step. So the question is really how to have the FAIR research data management become an implementation. That's right. Yeah. So collaboration and communication and information at first. Something it's very general, but I think actually this is true. I would say time. Because we cannot implement very quickly the thing. We also need to have time to share, and I will finish with the infrastructure as well.
Okay, and what do you think? What's needed? I mean, you are also here as a representative of the executive board of the GoFair initiative, so you are representing the GoFair community. and what's still needed, what's still lacking, and what is needed to further spur the fair movement. Susanne.
So here again, I think training is an important point, and maybe be sure that I think the FAIR recommendation to be implemented must be seen or kept as user-oriented recommendation and not as machine-oriented recommendation. I think this is maybe an important point. If we want the scientific community to be able to implement this recommendation, we have to be sure that they are focused on the user much more than on the tools and services.
Okay, now I want Emily get included in this panel. Do you have the Mentimeter results which you can share with us on the screen so we can compare what the audience contributed, what the assessment of the audience is, and what the assessment of our panelists is?
Absolutely. Yeah, great to be back. And thank you for this fantastic discussion so far. And it's been interesting to see there are some overlaps between what we've heard on the panel and what we've seen in the results. So thank you to everybody who contributed. Let's go to the first set of results, so the next slide, and let's have a look what's come up. So the first question was to ask people, what comes to your mind after hearing the keynote? And if we press on H, we should see the results coming up. Let's check. Give us a moment as we sort out our tech here. Okay. So we might switch quickly, and apologies for the small tech interruption here. If it's okay, I can share my screen now instead, and we can do it like that. Okay. Give me just one moment, and apologies everybody. I hope this gives you a chance to capture your thoughts. So here are the results of the first question, what comes to your mind after hearing the keynote? And definitely what stands out here is people really acknowledging how far we've already come, but also how far there is still to go. And how important it is also to keep it simple. But also, yeah, there's a lot of acknowledgement of just how crucial and timely this whole topic is. And yeah, pointing out also the focus on capacity development and cultural change. Klaus, is there anything that stands out to you as you see the results?
Cultural change is certainly one of the most important issues. Elena addressed that because she referred to the different science cultures in the different disciplines. And it's not that easy to establish like a fair world for all the scientists at the same space and being ready at the same time. So I very well understand that comment.
Yeah, thank you. Let's move to the next question, because of course we're all dying to know what our audience, how they rated how fair we are today. And the answer is 3.6, 3.5 actually just went down a little bit. So it's been moving between 3.5 and 4 point something. So shifting as the results are coming in. But this is a little lower also compared to what we heard from our speakers.
Yeah, I think there is, a difference between fully understanding the FAIR principles and fully implementing the FAIR principles. And I think the understanding of what FAIR is, it's not a PDF with a DOI, as Baran mentioned, it's much more than that. I think that has definitely changed over the past 3 years, but implementing the FAIR principles is certainly, that's the key challenge, not only for new data, and Baran mentioned it also legacy data should be covered when we talk about the FAIR principles. So I'm not too surprised by the 3.5, even though I have wished it is much higher than it is actually.
Sure. Luckily, though, we have lots of ideas about how we can go about changing this. So let's look to our next question. 2 more questions to go. So what are the next steps ahead in terms of implementing FAIR as a whole, meaning each part is equally implemented? And definitely I heard some similar themes to what came up from the discussion in terms of rewarding FAIR, in building sustainable infrastructure, creating more exchange around best practice for implementing, building also bridges between different institutions who are working in this area, and of course, more guidelines on the actual implementation. As you just said, awareness is one piece, but really putting into practice is another. Yeah.
And here I think sustainable infrastructure is certainly a key point, because all too often we get project funding, and the project is an activity in like enterprise with a defined starting point and defined end point. And once the project funding has run out, it's always a challenge to maintain the infrastructure which has been built during the project. So we have these discussions in Germany with the National Research Data Infrastructure. We have these discussions at the European level with the EOSC. We are talking about future business models to maintain these infrastructures, and that's certainly a very important issue which still needs to be solved. I completely agree with that one, just to pick out one of the many you have mentioned.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of also quite some detailed suggestions as well, so it's great people have really contributed. Thank you for everybody who answered. And now, of course, it's not only about implementing, it's also about creating, as we talked about, this cultural change towards a new normal, and that's the final question that we asked of our audience. What is needed to make fair research data management the new normal? And here I think there was definitely a big focus on communication, marketing, awareness building in general, which has obviously happened a lot already, but still an area to focus. There was also a few people talking about the need for having really user-friendly tools, user-friendly guidelines, so this simplicity aspect coming through again. We heard about data stewards already in the panel, and this showed up here as well. And of course, the concept of fair minds and the mindset shift that needs to happen for this to really work.
Yeah. Last week, the EOSC symposium took place, and we had a similar discussion on the community engagement. And one key challenge there is, how do we get involved the 1,000 researchers at the universities, not only in the established infrastructures, the ESRIs, for example, or the extra university research institutions like mine. So how can we reach out to the community at the universities, the students, the postdocs, the PhDs? And there, I think communication information is still key. And this is why I'm very happy that we had more than 500 registrations for the Go Fair Festival. Last week, the EOSC Symposium had 950 registrations. So these are the numbers we need. And this is, well, how we can reach out to the community. And for that purpose, even though I miss very much the person-to-person meetings, the virtual format is, is quite perfect to inform the people.
Yeah, so true. And yeah, thanks again to everybody who was part of the survey, and it still will be open, so you can still share your voice there if you would like to. And yeah, back to you, and thank you for taking the time to check what we have here. Very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily, for sharing the Mentimeter. And thank you to the attendees for contributing. In view of time, I would like to skip the last block of questions I had prepared, and would like to use the final, let's say, 15 minutes for the Q&A, because we received many questions from the participants. I have here my second device, which I will be using to go through the questions. And so just give me a second to skim read them. Okay, I have one which is good, and maybe that is one for our representative from the Science Ministry, Hans-Josef Linkens. It says, oh, now I clicked here it is. How is it that joint national funding for FAIR is so weak? Horizon Europe is joint funding, yes, but then not necessarily aligned with national efforts and with almost no national co-funding. Is there a EU national disconnect? Key question is, why do we have so little funding just for implementing the FAIR principles?
Well, I think that's a good question. I would answer it in two ways. I hope there is no too big disconnect between the European line and the national line, and actually I don't think so, because we accept or we very much have a look on what's going on in Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe, and we try to align our programs. However, the political awareness is not always extremely high, not always as high as it maybe should be. And this is, I think, for two reasons. One argument is, in part, it's work of the scientific community itself. It's fundamental scientific work. And if we give additional funding, we have to answer the question, why is this additional funding needed, as open science is a question of science itself. And the funding is not that bad, because a lot of money is given in Germany. I can only talk about the German situation. There is additional money and sustainable additional money, which is given to the NFDI and other initiatives. So the picture is mixed, but my message would be, I think we all have, as a community, have to make clear, and you as scientists have to make clear, what is the effect, what is the purpose, what is the FAIR standard good for. Karl said it cannot be measured. I'm fine with that. But nevertheless, FAIR has to show how it works and what the benefit of reuse is. That is not always so obvious in the political discussion. So that's a try again.
Okay. I have another one, and I think that this refers to Barend and his new, let's call it, interpretation of FAIR, which is, where is it, federated or AI ready. What do the panelists, and I would like to ask Barend, think about the use of FAIR as federated and AI ready, as opposed to its usual use? To what extent do both interpretations intersect? So, Barend, do you have an opinion on that?
First, unmute. I hope I switched microphone, that there is no echo now. So I don't think we should ever replace the FAIR acronym. I think it's very good that, for example, the people that work on research software have kept FAIR intact and then say FAIR for RS, for research software. So FAIR is a set of guiding principles, and it is needed to create standards. It's confused with standards and confused with lots of things. It's just a set of guiding principles. That's what it is. And that is definability, accessibility, and so on, and how you achieve that. I like the notion of fully AI or federated AI-ready data as an additional meaning of the general term FAIR, in the sense that everybody is talking about data-driven science and machine-assisted science, but the data we present to the system are a nightmare for machines. So I think the next phase is really to be able to create data that are optimally usable for machines. They are our major assistants of the next decade, but we still need narrative and normal scholarly communication next to it, of course. So I always argue we should now publish fully AI-ready data with a supplementary article, not the other way around. And the narrative and the argumentation is still needed. So I've never argued, which is sometimes what people tell, that we should stop writing. We need the narrative for people, FAIR data for machines, and when they come together, we have the internet for social machines. The human mind connected to the computer, that's what we need.
Okay, thank you very much, Barend. And now a question, Karl, which is to you and frankly also to me, from one of the 170 viewers we have. 170 viewers are attending this panel here. And the question, Karl, relates to the EOSC Future project, which we are discussing continuously in the EOSC Association Board. And the question is, EOSC Future will be an important step in the process. would you like to say a few words on what this project will bring?
Yes, I'll try, Klaus. I'm still trying to find out what it will bring, because I'm not a part of EOSC Future, as you know. And EOSC Future is still one of the Horizon 2020 projects that go under other conditions than the new Horizon Europe projects. In the Horizon Europe projects, there are boundary conditions that they have to report to the EOSC Association, for example, which was not the case for Horizon 20. Nevertheless, we have been in very good contact with the people that are now internally in the Horizon EOSC Future project working. We have another meeting scheduled for next week, and we'll have regular meetings to tune into what they are doing versus what we think is needed. And they have also said that it's only useful if we do this project and ultimately can deliver to the EOSC Association the results of the, let's say, intermediate period we are covering from what has been done in many projects before and what is still being done in several projects, useful in different disciplines, but what is now being done in the EOSC Future project with respect to developing or starting the core development for EOSC. So there is technical parts in the EOSC Future project which are aligned more and more with what we in the SFRIA wrote and think is needed. There are, let's say, more cultural aspects in the EOSC Future project with respect to, let's say, the training and the rewards and recognition domain and the culture around using the FAIR principles. And there are aspects in there of offering services based on what is being created or what is available already. And these three dimensions, all three are essential on top of an infrastructure, a hardware infrastructure. Usually I call that the E-infrastructures, which are essential as well for the whole development. So all in all, I'm so far, it's very early days because they have just started a couple of months ago, 2 months ago, if I am correct. I'm very optimistic with respect to the interaction we will see with the EOSC Future project. Much more, to be honest, than I had expected. Let me add one last sentence, if I may, Klaus. The same holds for the work program Horizon Europe. If you read now the EOSC part in the Horizon Europe work program, this is much more aligned than I had dreamt half a year ago. So I think the Commission is really putting an effort in this convergence phase.
From the previous workshop we had with the EOSC Future project, I would like to add that the EOSC Future project is also rethinking the positioning of the EOSC portal. So they are very much thinking about a system of a system which should build up the EOSC. And I think that is a very innovative approach towards really building up the EOSC, because the EOSC portal, in my opinion, and there might be a different that's more an information portal, a kind of a registry which services do exist, but it's not the EOSC. I have further questions which extend the FAIR principles, and maybe Elena, from the perspective of an implementation network, you have an opinion on the following. When we talk about FAIR, it's always related to FAIR data, but it could be extended to FAIR code, FAIR services, FAIR workflows, FAIR repositories, and so on. Do you think that these aspects are also as important as the FAIR principles for data? And do you have maybe discussed in Cooperas how you can achieve fairness of these other components of research data management infrastructures?
Yeah, I think they are crucial. As I was saying, open science is not focusing only on the final part, only on the output, call it data or article. We need to take into consideration the whole process. So if you make your code, if you make your protocol, if you make whatever stays in between, FAIR, everything will go smoothless, because you can, once you have these FAIR blocks, then you can simply recall a FAIR block. So you build up easily, and I would say in a speedy way. Okay, so it will be quicker. So the benefit will be for anyone, and I see FAIR applied to anything in the research cycle, not only on data. And in the social sciences and humanities, because my implementation network Cooperas come from the social sciences and humanities, they have an issue with the term data. Okay, so maybe talking about digital objects would be better. But definitely, it's not just about data. It's about every step of the research workflow, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. And a last question for Suzanne, because she's really a very enthusiastic fighter for the open science movement. And the question is, open science should be meant as inclusive science. COVID-19 is teaching us that no one can be left behind. Do you think, Suzanne, FAIR contains the recipe for a more global and inclusive progress? And what is still missing? So it's about the relation between open science and inclusive science,
Yeah, of course. I think FAIR is part of the movement to reach open science. But maybe I think we can say that in open science, and especially in EOSC, European Open Science Cloud, there are two communities mainly that need to discuss and to know better each other. The actors of the data and infrastructure world, and the actor of the open science, more FAIR. So, and these are not always the same people who know each other from the computing science and the FAIR. And so this is maybe where we can put some effort to facilitate dialogue here. And I hope the EOSC association can help on this issue.
Okay, thank you very much. In view of time, I would like to come to an end of this panel discussion. Would like Emily to come back on stage. Before that, I would like to thank again all our panelists for their contributions. It was again a great pleasure for me to working with you, and I'm pretty sure we will see each other soon in a workshop here, a panel there. So thanks again from my side. And Emily, back on stage, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. And also from my side, a huge thank you to our fantastic panelists. It's been a really interesting discussion and it gives us a lot of ground to work with and to dive deeper into over the next couple of days. So thank you to you as well, Klaus, for this fantastic discussion. So as we wrap up this first opening session, a couple of announcements. So the first thing is, as you know, this is a festival. It's all about the community, and we would love to get a community photo, a festival photo, so we can also see your lovely faces as well as you seeing ours. So we're going to do this right now in a couple of minutes. It will just take around 3 minutes, and we're actually going to invite you to go to a separate Zoom room so that we can see you. And I want to share with you a little bit more about the next sessions, and then we'll share with you the link and we'll meet over there. So firstly, I want to let you know that tomorrow we have our next plenary happening again at 12 p.m. CEST. And the title will be of Cloud Cosmos, NFDI, GaiaX, and EOSC, where we will talk about the synergies of these three major projects. And we have, again, a fantastic round of speakers, so don't miss that. And this afternoon, from 3:30 till 5 p.m. European time, we have a deep dive collaborative workshop session on FAIR practices. And we have 3 parallel sessions with great topics. We have Discovery, FAIR's Next Frontier with Peter Kraker. We have Towards, a semantic model for FDOs with Peter Muschke. It's going to be the Peter Gang, and a FAIR framework for academic publishing with Arnold Gingold. So not everyone's called Peter, and we'd love to see you there, whether or not your name is Peter. And now it's time to move to the photo Zoom room. You will find the link in the virtual attendee hub and hopefully also in the chat. So we'll see you over there for a photo, and then we'll hopefully see you later on for the workshop as well. Thank you for being part of this first opening session, and we can't wait to see you for the rest of the festival. See you in the photo room.